Adeneal. I hit the last note, letting it sound clean and clear. Technically, I didn't need to do much work to get a studio clean track prepped for radio release. I had technically done it all before, but if I was going to make an official track, I wanted to spruce it up a bit. This would be the version of this song everyone considered as the official one after all. So I took some time and cleaned everything up, using the instruments in the rental room to make sure all the songs sounded as good as I could make them. Then, with Hiromi watching eagerly, I created 5 copies on 5 shards. "There," I told her, as I handed them over. "That's the best I can do. It's amazing. You're amazing, Motoko. Now it's my turn. I'll talk to Ash again, but maybe I'll try to contact Morrow Rock as well." "Okay. Whatever you think is best," I decided, and Hiromi perked up at my acknowledgement. Nope. I wasn't uncomfortable. It was fine. If everyone started noticing me, I'd just change my face or something. Laughing man hack to make myself look like someone else. Boom. Problem solved. Nodding at that, I decided since my job was done to go celebrate. Hiromi and I split up. She was going to track down Ash and try to get the songs on the air, while I decided it was time to do something completely different. I pulled up to the Diravia dojo and stepped out, nodding at how there were plenty of people around. Walking inside, I headed to the back and found Sensei as usual standing on the tatami glaring at people until they did better. He noticed me with a glance, and then I enjoyed the fact he gave me a sort of double take with just his eyes as I approached his side calmly. "That corner. Forms." "Understood, Sensei," I agreed easily. I was here to grind. Blade 7 was a disgrace, especially since my reflex stat which governed it was already at 9. What kind of ninja was I with a low blade skill? I grabbed one of the shinai and found the corner he had ordered me to, and fell into the forms, moving through each movement with a cold-blooded focus. 100 blades XP gained. Blade skill level up. I nodded as I finished the forms, taking a moment to breathe deeply. I had earned the level up halfway through, so I had used the rest of the forms that I needed to finish under Sensei's eyes to adjust to the new knowledge. It felt good. Great even. I felt better, just with that one level up, proof that I was improving myself. Blades 8 was a good level. "Musashi, you are against Kusanagi." Sensei suddenly called out, and I looked over. The man really did have good timing. I had just finished the warm-up, now time to put it into practice. "Huh? I don't see the Oni." A young man called out, looking around in surprise. I took a moment to look him over. He was in a gi, and I could tell at a glance, he was good with the shinai he held in one hand. He was definitely one of the main students of the dojo. Sensei was talking about me. "Motoko Kusanagi, Jun is my brother," I offered as I approached the man, and he looked me over for a moment. "I remember now. I've seen you around before," he greeted, as he looked me over. I could tell there wasn't much awareness in his eyes. He knew nothing about me, and didn't seem to care. But a moment later he shifted, giving me a small bow which I realized was actually the start to the bout. Musashi didn't care much for talking apparently. I returned the bow, and then he engaged, bringing up his shinai and moved, his feet barely leaving the floor as he rushed in. Parry guided me in, locked my blade on his strike and forced it down, away from me. It didn't surprise him, or even make him hesitate. A moment later he continued on, shifting his blade up and in a strike that I deflected back with a firm guard, and gave him my own swipe, which he seemingly disappeared from, taking a few very fast steps back to dodge it. This guy wasn't a joke. He was damn good. Then he was back in, blade swinging, and I let myself go on the defensive. The boy was good. Not overall as good as I was, of course, definitely not as good on the defense especially, but he had a good enough foundation, and a reach advantage. I found myself either needing to take risks to attack, or just falling back on the defense. Stupid tall idiot. Why does everyone have to be taller than me? I wasn't that short to start with. I was going to master the blade and cut everyone down at the knee so I was the tallest. I shook off the silliness and grew cold to focus on the battle in front of me. Once more his attacks became relentless, using his reach to strike in ways that if I was any less skilled would hit me, but I could hold him off, but couldn't push forward. Then I noticed something amusing. I was in better condition than he was, his relentless attacks wore on him, and his breath was coming out harsher and harsher. If I couldn't defeat this incredibly skilled guy outright, then I would just let him wear himself out and defeat him that way. We continued, and I could watch as his frustration mounted. His continued failure forced him to try new moves, angles. He suddenly shifted, locking blades, and trying a trick to disarm me. It wouldn't have worked. I know how to disengage, but he had made another mistake on top of that, so I decided to punish him for it. He twisted, and it should have ripped the shinai from my grip, only my wrists were chrome. My entire wrist spun around, and since he had left himself open, I bonked him on the shoulder as I returned to my guard. Musashi. Fight your opponent, not who you want your opponent to be. Sensei called out, and I could see the white-hot rage flow up the young man's face, his neck, then cheeks, then ears all went red. He took a few steps back and shifted back into a stance, showing he was ready for another round. You're quite skilled, I offered, and instead of actually being taken earnestly, he very quickly lost his cool. I felt my amusement flicker into irritation, as he didn't even wait for any further acknowledgement before he rushed forward. Striking in a flurry, using his height and weight to try and batter through my defenses. He gave up completely on anything but force. But this guy was no Darth Vader. I deflected, and since he was going to be like that, I decided I would purposefully taunt him now. I started getting showy, parrying his blade away with a twirl, my shinai flashing in front of his eyes, before resuming my stance, to show how little he was pushing me. Musashi, seeing me taunting him as he continued to fail, completely lost what little was left of his cool, and at that moment, I struck. My blade slammed into his wrist, and then I moved, angling my blade in and around, and when we disengaged, his shinai came flying out of his hand. The same move he had tried against me, but against him it had worked. He didn't curse, or do anything like I expected as I caught his blade and offered it back to him. Just stared at me with a blank face as if everything that he expected had shifted. Kusanagi, forms. Sensei called out and I slumped. He had seen my flourishes and stuff to piss off Musashi and was punishing me for it. I offered the shinai back again, and this time the young man took it, but he didn't thank me for the match when I offered my own. I shrugged and hurried to the corner to get the glare of Sensei off my back. I watched out of the corner of my eye as Sensei pulled Musashi aside, and after a few quiet exchanges, I watched a glare be sent towards my body from the young man. That could be trouble later. Taking a quick shower at the dojo, I was heading back home. The exercise had actually done a good job of taking my mind away from the whole Rockaboy drama. Thankfully, I was feeling better about it once I came to the realization that if it failed, it was literally a non-issue. So stopping for food, I headed home and came into the apartment with a bag of takeout, smiling a bit as June was there, along with Akari. I got food. I called out and June grunted from the couch, but did look interested as I walked over with the bags and started putting everything on the table. Hungry? I offered her curry and she looked at me for a minute before breaking out into a smile. Sure, I can eat. Something going on? June asked me and I smiled at him a little. Good and bad, I guess. Hiromi went a bit crazy. You ever listen to Growl FM? I asked, and June shook his head. Which was obvious, it didn't play enough Us Cracks or other pop. Sometimes. Akari added, and I settled onto the couch. Hiromi talked to Ash, the host, and she played some of my songs. I explained and June suddenly started coughing, having been halfway into a box of fried rice already that apparently he started choking on. Who? That's pretty interesting. Akari offered, but June, after coughing and banging on his chest, looked to me in shock. Seriously? Yeah. I chewed Hiromi out for doing it without my permission, but it's done. I spent most of the day at the music studio making studio versions of the songs I played during the Red Dirt gig, so Hiromi is probably currently calling up every radio station to try and get them played. Suddenly I was swamped by massive arms as June lifted me right off the couch and started spinning me around. Motoko. That's amazing, he shouted up to the ceiling, utterly pleased as he spun me around over and over. Okay, enough. Put me down. Grr. I growled as June continued spinning me, seemingly refusing to let go. Before I finally started kicking a bit to show I was done, and he let me back onto my feet. Will they play your song again? If they do, I want to hear it. June offered and I just scoffed. If you want to hear it, I'll just play it, or give you a shard or something. The current version doesn't sound great, since it's from the live show. I still want to hear it. He argued, going to the radio to turn it on. I turned to Akari and rolled my eyes. Hair. Don't worry, little killer. June-chan is just happy. I know that. I responded back, grumbling as I settled in, watching Akari reaching over and snagging all the good stuff out of June's meal. I allowed it. Punishment for spinning me around like that. Any news on Yuto? I asked, Akari quietly as June fumbled with the radio. His trouble not at all, because I was purposefully fucking with the channel select, making him go past the correct channel every time he tried to go to Growl FM. Definitely not. Oh? Interested in hunting him down, little killer? Want to add another to your score? I don't keep track, that would be tedious. I answered truthfully as I ate some food. But you are still hovering around, and you aren't doing it just to hang out with June, you still have that air about you. Like you are here because you were told to. Ha! You have sharp eyes as ever. Yep. I'm still guarding your bro. But I've told Fujimura-sama that nothing is going on, so I'm mostly here to cover June now, in case the sushi shows up and tries to talk to him again. Sushi? I asked, not sure why she used that word. It's what we call guys that are dead men walking. Uncooked, but still dead. Get you? She asked, and I snorted at the term before nodding. Yeah, get it. Well, that's certainly a visual. I muttered, but Akari just grinned at me. Motoko. They aren't playing your song. June whined at me, and I gave him a bland look in response. June, my songs aren't the only one the station plays. It should be. I just rolled my eyes as I settled in to finish eating. June spent most of the meal bothering me about my music. Stupid Oni-chan. Dash. Wow, you do need practice. I told Malcolm as I stared at his electronics score at the shooting range. Oh, come on. Yeah, Malcolm. You need practice, Hiromi teased beside him as her own score was much more respectable. Yeah, Malcolm. Ichi joined in as well with a smirk that Malcolm almost punched him for. Ichi hadn't even done a round yet. You three are a riot. Rebecca offered, standing in her own lane, her eye-axe in hand as she was reloading it. Rebecca had definitely been more eager than even Hiromi, but it didn't mean she was actually more accurate. Of course, Rebecca had also fired all of her rounds in seconds, where Hiromi had plinked down the range. This whole chain of events that led to all of us gathered at a gun range for practice had been simple enough. Malcolm had mentioned to me after meeting up with him for lunch that he felt like he needed more to really act as a solo, so I had invited him for a range day. Then, since range days were fun, I had invited everyone else too. I hadn't intended on inviting Hiromi because of school, but she had found out somehow and had decided this counted as a Section 9 activity, so had joined us. Honestly, I just expected she wanted a break from class, but I didn't call her on it. I could understand being frustrated with a classroom. Rebecca, how quickly can you reload that thing? I mean, fast enough? Get a few mags together and try to work on quick reloading as you run out of ammo, okay? I can give you some tips for faster reloads as well if you want. I offered, miming the motion with my own copperhead as I aimed it down the lane, and then dropped. The mag flipped the other mag on the table into the receiver without any fumbling and mimed firing again. "Sure, kitten, I'd appreciate that," she said quietly, then turning it into a smirk as I pouted at her. "Yeah, kitten," Malcolm teased, jumping on his chance for revenge. I turned to glare at Malcolm, who just smiled at me, but Rebecca had my back. "Don't need to hear that from you, Stick." "Stick?" I interrupted, smiling because the moment Rebecca had said it, Malcolm went a little red. "Oh, he didn't tell you?" Rebecca asked with a smirk, and I looked at Malcolm, my face straight, just waiting for the story to come out. "Oh no. I'm not saying shit." He grumbled and glared at Rebecca, who just cackled at him, before turning to the group and looking pleased to share. "Stick here tried showing off his baby to me, and missed the gear shift, nearly sent himself into a pole." Rebecca explained, and Malcolm moaned as I turned to him to give him a look. "Really, Malcolm? Again?" Rebecca asked before cackling even louder, and Malcolm's ears were turning red, which meant it was time to stop teasing him. "You've been doing that race practice?" I asked, and Malcolm perked up a bit. "I have. I asked around and got in touch with a guy that sets up some street races. Mostly I've just been checking out the routes they take, and racing through them, getting used to my baby," he explained, and I just smiled at him in turn. "Just make sure you don't miss the stick this time." Itchy razzed him, and then Malcolm actually did lash out, punching Itchy's shoulder, sending the other boy away with a wince as he started rubbing where he was struck. "Ass. You're the ass." "Boys, you're both beautiful," Hiromi added, having turned back to the lanes. "Besides Itchy, Malcolm isn't the only one with a new nickname," Hiromi added, and I looked to the boy, who instantly faced away, but I was insistent, and eventually Itchy slumped. Rebecca was too busy giggling into her arms as she was doubled over. "It happened when we were moving stuff, and Rebecca was with me. I was distracted and didn't notice the speed bump," he explained, and Rebecca then finally cut in. "Yep, so he's speed bump, now," Rebecca offered, and I just laughed at his nickname, giving Itchy a commiserating smile, and then whipped them all back into firing down the lane. So there we are, Pillar is acting like a gonk, and this Borg is just looming over him. Pillar looks down to the electronic key he had to Main's car, and he says, "Well, you can't really blame me for this, your security sucks." And Main just glares. Rebecca spoke standing on top of the couch we were all sitting around at. Somehow after the shooting range, Rebecca had decided we all needed to party some more, and here we were. "Did Main bash his head in?" I asked, and Rebecca started cackling. "No, it's better." Main looks down at the electronic key, and hits my bro where it hurts, he says. "Your toy didn't work, so I can." And Pillar the fucking gonk gets outraged. "It would have worked if it wasn't for that fucking kid." And points at Sasha. I chuckle at the image of younger Sasha being a little shit as Rebecca continued. So Main basically dragged Pillar to the car and forced Pillar to try again, and it actually worked. Pillar really did make a working hack key for Main's car. So Main decided if he could do that, he could do it for other rides, and so Pillar was brought into Main's crew. Rebecca explained, and I laughed at the end of the story. I looked over and saw that while I was interested in Rebecca's story, the rest of my chums weren't that into it. They were each distracted by their own thing. Hiromi had disappeared at some point, while Malcolm and Itchy had both been distracted by one of the girls on the dance floor. I smirked at their very obvious stares, and the fact she was at least a few years older, and obviously not interested. "How are they doing anyways?" I asked, trying to sound casual, as Rebecca took a sip from her drink. "Same old. Sasha is getting more freedom, things are cooling down. Main even traveled to the afterlife to check in for some work. They didn't tell me if something came up though," she explained, but at the end I picked it up. A hint of bitterness. Rebecca had been a bit squirrely about joining us for range day at first. I looked her over as she noticed before sighing. It's nothing. Just pissed that Maine is still treating me like a hanger-on, and not a member. She offered, and I nodded at that. It must grind at her, to have us accept her so readily, and Maine still hesitates. I would just have to keep offering her honey until she was fully a member of Section 9, and Maine could go jump off a bridge. I nodded. Yeah, Operation Steel Rebecca was working out wonderfully. Movement to the side caught my eye and I looked up to see Judy approaching suddenly. Hey, I heard you were up here. She greeted, and I offered her a smile and a wave. Yep. We are doing a celebration day. Hey Judy, how are you? Tired. She decided after a moment, and without a word she sat down. A drink in her hand earned her full attention for a few moments, and then she sighed as she finished. I really liked your music, BD. She finally said, and I blinked in surprise at the response. Oh. So Here. She said, pulling out a shard and offering it to me. I took it and realized with a quick scan that it was just my red dirt gig BD on a shard. I looked at it in confusion and turned to Judy and she sort of sighed. Would you sign it? She asked, and I very slowly blinked, forcing my eyes to close and then open to make sure this was reality. What? What music, BD? Rebecca asked, interrupting my own confusion as she stood up on the seat and peered over the table at what I was holding. I did a performance, like up on stage a while back. I explained, a little awkwardly. I just played some songs, but I gave Judy the raws for my BDs and I scrolled one then. I looked up at Judy. You want me to sign it? Please. She agreed. That thing is going to be worth eddies in a few years. She said surprisingly confidently and I felt a little odd. What? Judy just rolled her eyes at me. Motoko, you have technical skill, and you're good at writing songs. You sing with emotion, you play well, you've made new songs that aren't corpo trash. People are already starting to like your music. She explained and I just looked away awkwardly, which didn't help, but Rebecca was right there. Okay, this I want to see. You mind letting me see? Rebecca asked Judy, who nodded waving her hand. Sure, but only if Motoko actually signs it. She said again, smirking at me, as I looked at the shard. I breathed in and out. Sure. I said after a moment. It didn't matter. I took the marker Judy had and signed it, and a moment later, she took the BD and popped it into a BD case, and then pulled out a different one and handed it to Rebecca. Here. She offered and Rebecca grinned as she took it, and grabbed one of the BD wreaths that were all over the bar, and settled in. I watched as she slipped the shard inside and then as she slumped back into the world of the BD. You doing all right? Judy asked suddenly. I looked at her in confusion and she looked a little bashful. Yeah, why? You looked pretty uncomfortable when I asked for your autograph. Figured. Nah, it's nothing. You being careful. New artists can get in trouble in Night City. Especially ones that don't have backing to protect them. I opened my mouth to blow off the question, but instead took it seriously. Breathing in and out, I figured out what to say. I'm not extremely worried. Hiromi has good corpo training. She'll see most of the traps coming. I hope. And it's pretty hard to threaten me physically. I'm confident in killing anyone that tries to make a run for me, unless they are absolutely top-tier mercs. But yeah. I'm still a little uncomfortable with it, I guess. Judy nodded, sipping at her drink some more. Well, I can't offer much. She admitted softly, glaring towards the corner of the room, which I followed her eyes and saw none other than Susie Q. Susie's been pulling back on a lot of our work helping people lately. She'll just say you aren't one of us, so why should she offer to help? I appreciate that you want to help, Judy. You've always been cool with me, even with all my crazy shit. Well, other than when you sold my BD without asking. I said pointedly. Just don't dump another only thing BD on me without a fucking warning, you cyberpiece Joe. she said, purposefully avoiding what I said. But just because the mocks won't help doesn't mean the mocks won't help. Maybe even as an apology as well. She offered, and I nodded. She was basically offering what she could, and I appreciated it a lot. We both went silent after. Judy relaxing and enjoying her drink, and seemingly absorbing the atmosphere of the club, while I went back to watching the boys who had both been shot down by the girl they had their eye on. Both boys had deflated pretty badly when she had gone for some older pretty boy with a fake platinum chain, who was trying too hard to look rich. Which is hilarious, because if the girl was interested in Eddie's, Itchy and Malcolm definitely had more. My tunes were loaded thanks to me. Well, I looked over at Malcolm. His tendency towards expensive cars might mean he wasn't as loaded as he appeared. Did my tunes have money problems still? We hadn't really discussed it much. I mostly let Hiromi handle money and I expected my choices to be good, but I was also weird about Eddie's, and Itchy had his grandma, and Malcolm had his family. I moved around the still braindancing Rebecca and settled in next to the tunes. Hey guys. Motoko. Malcolm greeted with a grumble. The boy was practically face down on the table. Don't worry about it, Chum. She wasn't the sort of girl you wanted anyways. I offered, but Malcolm just sent me a look. I wasn't going to marry her, Motoko. Malcolm replied, and Itchy and I both snorted at the same time. Itchy's failure as well seemed to weigh on him less as he patted Malcolm on the back. It's all right, Chum. He offered and Malcolm sighed. But we both failed. I really wanted to beat you. He whined and Itchy laughed. Not all bets work out. Itchy replied and I blinked at that. You guys bet on who could pick up a girl? Well. Yeah? Itchy said, blushing a little. It was just a bro bet. He offered and I looked confused as Malcolm sort of faux coughed. It was just to mess with each other, Motoko. We would have teased whoever lost, but we both did. Bummer. Well, I'm kinda glad you did. That girl looks like trouble. I wasn't going to date her either. Malcolm whispered into a sigh. Looks like Malcolm didn't care if she was trouble or not. We all relaxed, and eventually Malcolm perked up, returning to shooting the shit with Itchy, and girl watching. I mean, Lizzie's was a BD bar, so I wasn't sure if this was really the best place to try and pick up girls, but boys will be boys. Woo! Rebecca suddenly cried out and I jumped a bit, reaching for my gun before relaxing. That was Nova. She cried out, jumping up onto the table as she pulled off the wreath. I noticed Judy grabbing it and taking the shard a moment later. Then Rebecca turned to me. What the hell? You've been holding out on me, strings. Strings? Yeah, you definitely ain't a kitten. You played those strings like a pro. Rebecca offered and I smiled at the fact I had apparently earned an upgraded nickname before Rebecca flopped onto the table in front of me, staring me in the eye. Why didn't I get an invite, huh? Your Chum Becca wants to go to a fucking awesome concert, you know. Sorry. I answered back, but I was definitely a bit uncomfortable. Rebecca was a bit close. I just didn't really want to invite anyone for it. It was supposed to just be a me thing, and someone invited June, and then it spread. I said, giving a side eye to my Chums, who looked away. Rebecca glared at me for a moment longer before switching into a smirk. Fine, I'll forgive you, but I get free tickets to all your shows. She demanded and I just laughed back. Sure, Rebecca. All of my many future shows that I'm totally planning. I said with a roll of my eyes. How many gigs would I really do in the future? Like 2. I was really only doing this for fun. That night I spent a while working on the Tachikoma. Cleaning up more of its code, slimming it down again, making sure what it actually needed to know was saved while junk code was removed. I was basically letting the Tachikoma tell me what it had learned through the day, and then I was cutting or reinforcing the data to make sure it was accurate. No, Tachikoma-chan, June's head wasn't a good place to place the metal blocks. I literally have no idea where you came up with that idea. Okay, so I may have saved that particular data and might maybe use it later, but that was beside the point. Random processes could pop up with decisions that I had to remove because they were absurd. And so the night went. Tashikoma was currently inhabiting its actual shell, and I was pruning its decision-making as I also sometimes took control and practiced moving around. It was a good combo, letting me teach the Tashikoma directly what I wanted it to do. I was idly listening to the radio as I worked, my mind a blur of programming, meaning I wasn't really paying attention, until suddenly I heard it. A familiar set of chords, the intro to a song that I was incredibly familiar with, because I had played those chords. I turned away from Tashikoma, as Growl FM began playing The Pretender. To hear Foo Fighters on the radio. It was nostalgic, it was nice. Even if I couldn't stop shivering at the sound of my own vocals. That was me. I listened until the song ended, until it moved on to another song from someone I've never heard of. But that was going to keep happening. I was on the radio now. The sound of something falling over had me turn, and I stared at the Tashikoma. I was still plugged into it, synced in, but I had stopped acting, so it had taken over its controls again and followed through with the instructions I had been giving it. The set of blocks were pushed off the edge of the table. I let myself refocus, smiling at the little bot correctly doing what it was supposed to. Good job, Tashikoma-chan. Dash. The slap of fists into the padding was filling the air as Hayato and I went at it. I had woken up feeling like doing some fist fighting, and invited Hayato for a workout. She spun, letting off a spinning kick which was pretty outside of her normal moveset, as she usually didn't like taking her eyes away from her enemies thanks to her Karen giving her increased perception. I could only assume it felt like a long time as you spun around, that you simply had no idea what was happening. I braced, letting the kick land on my forearms, which if not for her shin padding she'd have felt it more than I would before, charging into grapple. No. She howled rapid fire as I grabbed her and lifted her bodily off the floor before slamming her down into the tatami mats. The sound of her breath blown out of her was my signal for victory. I gave her a few moments to catch her breath before I had to tease her a bit. That was an impressive kick. I offered, and she pushed me away with a scowl. You and your stupid defense. Moron. She yelled at me, and even sent a faux kick from the floor that made me jump up and away laughing. That was a bad time to kick. It should have worked. You don't have a Karen, and you aren't using your Sandy. You practically told me what you were doing. Your eyes kept flickering, and you were light on that leg. It was obvious you were psyching yourself up for a big kick. Uck. She hissed, glaring, standing up and wiping some of her hair from her forehead. Strands sticking with how much she was sweating. We had been at this for a while. The two of us, going at it, and to my surprise Hayato hadn't cut it short like she had last time. We were just pitting ourselves against each other for the win. You will have to tell me what make of sin lungs you are using, she said, sounding a little out of breath as she stood up and resumed her stance. I don't have any. I'm still using my natural ones, I said as I retook my stance as well. For a moment Hayato looked irritated, before it disappeared. But I still caught a tiny snippet of her cursing under her breath. Stupid Ixakaisnut. Hayato? Prepare yourself. She shouted out and then charged, and we were back at it, blows coming in. Once again I was on the back foot from her Karen's speed, giving her so much time to adapt and adjust for each of my blows. Whenever I did go on the offensive, she was frustratingly elusive, slipping and ducking each blow as casual as could be. I jerked back and she got a nice punch through, smashing into my cheek, but I jerked with the hit and retaliated by grabbing onto her extended arm. Ono Thaisagai Ian. She yowled, as I gave her a nice hip toss, sending her tumbling onto the mat, and once I had her down, her enhanced perception wasn't strong enough to stop me from pinning her again. This is supposed to be a match for good martial arts, not dirty grappling. She grumbled, and I just laughed at her. Grappling happens in every fight once you aren't in a ring. You'd best get used to it. Make sure it doesn't catch you by surprise. Besides, jiu-jitsu is a great martial art. I ignored her grumbling as I let her up, and once again she rose up to her feet to go again. I laughed and we went back into it. Whatever had happened in her life to give her this much energy was pretty fun. I just continued fighting, enjoying the slow trickle of street brawling and body alerts I was getting as we smashed into each other. Hayato-sama. Her guard called out suddenly and I pulled back. I saw the flash of fury over the girl's face before it blanked out. I ordered not to be disturbed. She spoke simply quietly, and actually slow-paced. It told me she was honestly pissed. "Forgive me, Hayato-sama." Nakagawa-sama demanded I interrupt. "You are requested at home." He offered apologetically, even bowing to the girl as she glared and just breathed in slowly in and out. "Very well. I will have to cut our match short," she told me, and I nodded. "Till next time," I offered, and she nodded, seemingly pleased that I wasn't upset at her sudden leaving. I took a moment to put our pads away in the storage chests around the area, and then headed for the showers. A quick shower to wash the sweat away was enough for me to feel better as I left the dojo. I would have to come back again tomorrow for another match with someone. I really wanted to get my blades and street brawling skills up. Relying only on guns was the hallmark of a bad assassin after all. What was the movie again? Leon the Professional. Yeah, that sounded right. Sure, taking advice on assassination from Hollywood was a mistake, but it sounded right, so I was going to go. I stopped. A horde of TC gangsters was sitting on my car. I took it all in, reading the body language, and instantly knew shit was about to go down. What the fuck? Go on. Don't stop walking. A voice behind me had me turn, and there was Musashi, and a few of the guys from the dojo. All of them with live blades at their sides. Well now, this was unexpected. I went to start hacking into everyone around me as I slowly turned to keep both groups in sight, as if I was taking in what was happening and not already plotting to kill them all, when I felt it. A netrunner was in their system protecting them. They hit me with the equivalent of an electronic slap, trying to push me out of the system and give me a warning that they were there. I might be able to break through their defenses and attack, but I had no connection to them, even while they had one to me. I was on the defensive until I could get them in sight. Thankfully they were attacking me, and I could backtrace it easily enough. A line of golden light went through the walls around the dojo. They were there. "What's going on?" I demanded, trying to get some information about what the hell was going on, but Musashi behind me scoffed. He took a few steps forward that told me he was some sort of ringleader here. "That is none of your concern. You will be coming with us. Perhaps if you are quiet, and do not irritate me, I won't get to enjoy showing you true talent with a blade," he asked aloud, looking at the gangsters around us that were all grinning amused. I glanced back at him and just had to wonder. What were these idiots thinking? I wasn't important to the TC, but I had connections. "You realize my brother the Oni won't take this lightly. Nor will Fujimura-sama." I spoke, and then to my surprise I was slapped. I had seen it coming. Musashi had telegraphed the move just fine, so I jerked my head as he struck to lighten the hit, but he still did it. "Don't bring up Fujimura-sama's name so casually. Your brother is one of the reasons we are speaking. You will come with us. Muritaka-sama commands it." He continued calmly, and I realized that Musashi, for all his samurai aesthetic, was a dirtbag. If Muritaka wants to speak with me, there are proper ways to do this. "Are you sure this is how this needs to go down?" I asked, but I was already ready. "You are nothing but a whelp, and Muritaka wants to ensure the Oni knows his place. You will." I leapt, bouncing well past Musashi's reach as he tried to reach out. I flipped, landing on the edge of the wall surrounding the dojo and then flipping inside, out of sight of anyone. So this was about June? What he had done? Who was Muritaka? And most importantly, How many of these fools should I kill for this? As I landed, I faced a woman, early 20s probably. She glanced up in surprise at my sudden appearance, and then I leapt forward, pushing all of my power into a punch, slamming her stupid face into the concrete wall behind her. The golden light connecting me to the netrunner that was trying to protect these fools cut off. Getting your ass knocked unconscious will tend to disrupt hacking attempts. I watched her slump, blood already gushing down her broken nose. 250 XP gained. So she was still alive. I ignored her and leapt again, this time just avoiding the first gunshot from one of Musashi's goons. Looks like despite carrying blades they had guns too. Screams of surprise from the vendors that surrounded the inside walls rang out, and suddenly it was a madhouse. But I was leaping up onto the roof of the dojo, and from there I disappeared. Time to get to work.